a wee while, and no surprises about that. The role today is, I just want to acknowledge what's going on here in Ashburton at the moment. The last 2 or 3 weeks is going to be interesting. And my role with Waitaha Primary Health is to support the well-being of the Ashburton population. And while we are concerned about what's going on today and tomorrow, my emphasis is on what's going to be happening in the next 3 months, 6 months, 9 months as we work through the clean-up process and deal with the fallout of people's well-being as they deal with insurance companies and tidying up their farms, etc., etc., etc. So I have prepared a quick presentation, and while it's a number of slides, I'm not going to go through them all. So we'll just, I think, what's happening there? Right. Georgina is the Ashburton District Council Territory Rep on our board, and I am appreciative of the governance that Georgina brings to our board. Makes my job a little bit easier. Next slide. So just go to the next slide. So I just want to talk about some of the initiatives that are currently going on as far as well-being of Ashburton population is concerned. So over recent months we've actually managed to put in some additional mental health services into our general practice teams. For some of you that may realise what they are, that's a health improvement practitioner as well as the health coaches. So that is just getting underway. Not all practices have those because that is part of the funding streams that we have to operate, and there's some additional funding coming through from the 1st of July. And so we're hopeful that we'll have a full complement of staff available, which is very timely given what Ashburton's going through at the moment. So some of the services that we have been doing, I want to acknowledge that Waitaha Primary Health cannot provide alone all the health services that are required. So this is about partnerships. And, you know, there's a number of examples down here that we work closely with the District Council, with Safer Community. We even have some funding for it with Advance Ashburton. And what I'm trying to say to you is that while we don't lead a lot of those services, we are a partner in those services, and without one of us being a partner in those services, we probably wouldn't have a service. It's as simple as that. So I do want to acknowledge the Ashburton District Council in their support to us, and especially around the youth one-stop shop. That's a very good example, and we have many of those within Waitaha right across our geographical boundaries, which is quite significant, where we do have processes in place where we have joint funding arrangements to ensure that we can actually deliver those services, which is meeting the needs of, in this particular case, Ashburton District Council. Currently, our general practice teams, and I want to emphasise this, are very busy. We do have a shortage of general practitioners within the Ashburton area at the moment, and a number of them are actively recruiting. And of course, they are coming in from overseas, which means they have to follow the council, medical council regime. And there is a little bit of a hold up in those processes at the moment. It's not just impacting on Ashburton, it's impacting New Zealand wide. So we're just working through those processes and working with our practices at the moment with that. There are 2 other things that I would like to talk today about, and that is the May-June flood and the support around that, and just give you a little bit of an update around the COVID processes that have been followed and the role that Waitaha plays in a very tightly controlled Ministry of Health processes. Next slide. Just want to give you a little bit of an heads up of some of the program supports that we do offer. And at the moment I've just listed them all out there. I'm not going to read them all out. But one of the interesting things that we have been involved with is around the navigator support, the patient support navigators, which is a link with Advance Ashburton. We are very appreciative of that, and of course that has led to then our whānau ora navigators as well as our Pacifica navigators and the health days that have been established for the Pacifica groups, as well as what we're trying to do with the with whānau, with Māori, and that has been a real winner for us as well as for the population within those ethnic groups within Ashburton. So just coming back now to the response to the floods. There's no doubt about it that the support that I've had from James and Tony is very much appreciative. And is it last week? Did I call that meeting? Last week I facilitated a meeting, Carolyn, you were there, and that was to try and bring all the GPs and the nurses in primary care, as well as a number of other providers, pharmacy. We had Rural Support Trusts, we had the Ashburton Hospital representatives there, suicide prevention. I'm just giving you some examples of who was in that meeting. And it was just to sort of outline, actually, what does the GPs need? Where do you think we're heading? And what are we going to be putting in place? So since that time, we've been working with Tony and James, and there's a booklet that's being prepared, and that'll be given to all our general practice team members, as well as our nursing staff within our general practices, just to outline what services are available, so that we can actually ensure that we are maximising those resources that are available for well-being of the Ashburton people. So that's underway, and I know, Tony, that you were working on that last Friday, and I've facilitated another meeting planned for next Thursday, just to sort of see where we're going. One of my tasks was to look at what I can do to support the residents of Ashburton if they do need to see a GP around anxiety, depression, etc., etc. So I'm working on establishing with the DHB and the Ministry of Health support, and I'm not quite there yet, that if they do need to be seen by a general practitioner because of their health status, that there is actually going to be a free consultation. So I have actually already set up in our web claiming portal for our general practice teams. That advice has gone out to our general practice teams on Friday, a day after we spoke about it, where they can just tick a box, and that is for all practices within the Waitaha Primary Health. So that includes our colleagues from the Waimakere District Council, because some of those people up there have also been subject to floods, Pines Beach, significant damage in Oxford, etc. So that'll be just a little tick box where the practices will be funded to see that particular patient, which means that there will be no co-payment charge to the patient, which I think is a very good step, as they then can move. The GPs will then have that information of where they need to go, what support can be done from insurance companies, what rural support trusts, welfare issues, women's refuge, etc., etc. So that's where we're up to at the moment. So if you invite me back next time, maybe I'll be able to give you a little bit more of an update on what we're trying to achieve there. And no doubt next Thursday there'll be some other ideas that we'll be looking into, and we'll just be working through those. I am very appreciative of my board. My board has just given me the mandate just to get on with this and put this system in place. And the reason for that is, folks, that believe it or not, I've been in this game now for nearly 20 years. And this is the fourth or fifth time I've been through a process like this. We've been through the earthquakes in Canterbury. We went through the big fire that we had up there. We've been through the mosque shooting, and in particular impact on us in our rural areas was around drought, but also the Kaikoura earthquake that you're all probably well aware of. So look, we've been dealing with this for a little while, and a stitch in time does save nine. I know it's an old cliche, but actually we have to get on front of it. And there's always more to be done. But where we are at the moment is great. On top of all this, we've got flu vaccinations coming through, and luckily with the border closures, we're not seeing a very high incident rate of flu at the moment, but we are monitoring that. And then we have the COVID, the vaccination program around that. And, as I was driving down, for the first time I was on Teams, and they were wondering what I was doing, driving the car, when I was sitting there listening in. But where we are at the moment is that Tier 1 and Tier 2, which was really the frontline staff, we are now moving into Tier 3, which means that for us there's going to be some communication going out to the residents of Ashburton that meet the criteria of Tier 3, the over 65s initially, and that will be going out via a communication brief, but also the general practices will be then actually texting those people that are eligible. there's no doubt about it that over the next few weeks that the COVID vaccination program will be winding up as the vaccinations become more available. And of course, you've probably seen all the media that there's about 1.5 more vaccines coming into the country next month. So that's where we are with that. Again, it will be putting a little bit more pressure on our general practice team. So you can sort of see what we're trying to do here is just trying to make sure that the well-being of the Ashburton people here, which you're responsible for, is actually cared for. So I've just listed out some of the specific programs that we have there, and I'm not going to go through them all. But if there are any questions today that you would like to ask me around those two particular points, COVID vaccinations or the support that we're putting in place for the floods, I'm more than happy to try and respond to that. And Georgina's here. It's good because Georgina will be at the next board meeting and can help me with my board to sort of say, hey, this is where we're up to. So, Neil, I could go on right through that, but I want to keep it fairly succinct today to those two particular items. That's probably very much on your radar screen, but just acknowledging Carolyn and the support that I've been having from all the parties down here, including St John, including Fiends, and all the other parties. So, thank you.
Great, thanks for that update, Bill. Georgie, you got nothing further to add to Bill's?
Oh, not really. It's been a fairly busy time, so there's been lots of meetings and there's lots going on, but you're all involved in those same meetings and having lots going on as well. So I think my role here is to keep Bill informed about what's happening on the ground here with support from people like yourselves who are obviously out on the ground and stuff as well, and doing things like organising the meeting that we had last week with most of the relevant players down here that are involved in Waitaha was really good. And I think keeping that kind of contact ongoing will be really important over the next wee bit to make sure that we can nip stuff in the bud before it gets
and
out of control.
One of the other issues, Neil, is what I forgot to mention, is around enrolling those patients. So people moving into the district to actually manage and have access to general practice. That's something that we're just working through, and we do have support from the AAU of the hospital at the moment.
It's seems to be sort of an issue getting people enrolled. Some practices have shut their doors because they can't get more doctors, and it was one of the things you mentioned. Is it your job to fix that, or whose job is it to fix it, to try to get more doctors into this country, or trained, or and lead nurses?
You have to remember that the practices are private businesses. Okay.
But
in saying that, I'm not shirking my responsibility as their PHO, their primary health organisation. I do have been onto the council to try and actually facilitate that. We also have recruiting agencies that we link into and then forward the names of those GPs that may be looking for a role from overseas. So we forward those to our practices. So, we are fairly well involved in that, Neil.
Cool. Councillors, any questions, especially around COVID-19 or the floods, or perhaps anything else if need be? Stuart.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Do you actually believe what the Ministry are telling us? I'm over 65 and it should have been vaccinated by the end of June. Minister of Health guaranteed the end of June. Now it's possibly the end of July, perhaps. I've rung the 0800 number. They said even in Group 2, unless you're a border worker or something like that, you don't qualify. Have they finished Group 2? To me, it's a bit of an absolute mess up. Why aren't we told the truth right from the start? Either they haven't got the vaccines. What's wrong with the Canterbury District Health Board? I know Nelson Marlborough have done lots more than us. South Canterbury have done lots more than us. Lots of other health boards have done lots more than Canterbury. Why are Canterbury lagging? I was told on the 0800 number, other areas haven't got an international airport or an international port. Well, that's a pretty weak excuse. What is actually going on?
Well, you're asking a fairly difficult question for me to answer. At the end of the day, the mandate from the Ministry to Canterbury District Health Board was to vaccinate around about 100,000, deliver about 100,000 vaccinations before the end of June. We are well on track of that. The frontline boarders and frontline staff have taken a significant period of our time to get that done. We have been looking at the, and as far as Tier 3, about the over 55s for Māori and Pacifica, and that we're just working through that. But, I can assure you that there is some communication being planned right at this very moment for that information to go out to the community regarding the next step, which is Tier 3 over 65s being the priority to actually get vaccinated.
Councillor Mackay.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Welcome, Bill. Welcome,
Thanks.
Georgina. My question is, you talked about the residents of Ashburton, and then in the answer to a question you talked about the district. Can you please tell me, and council, as a provider, health provider, is it the district that you provide for, or is it the Ashburton? In other words, where does Methven sit?
Okay, so Methven belongs to Pegasus Health, okay? But in my discussion to you folks is that we are very mindful of the earthquake, the flood scenario. So I am trying to talk around about the Ashburton population as entirety. I do not want to fragment what I'm saying here to exclude Methven, to exclude Hinds. This is about us looking at the whole district, Angus. So I'm quite keen to sort of be talking about populations.
Good. Thanks for that. Any further? Yeah, Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can sort of understand where Councillor Wilson comes from being slightly cynical. I was in Wellington on Friday and I asked the good doctor, who's the saviour of the nation, whether there would be any reduction in COVID rollouts, and he ensured no, there would not be. In fact, they will be ramping them up to 100,000 a week or whatever. And then on Saturday, I read in the local paper that they've cut back on the number of vaccinations which are being done in the penal institutions in the country. Just a comment. My question is, you say letters or communication are going out to all of the over 65s. Now that is a big bunch of the population. Are they all going out at the same time, or are they first going out to those with pre-existings, which, you know, the health authorities have the details of, or is it just going to be a job rollout?
Yeah, good question, John. Look, all I can say to that is that the over 65 with chronic conditions will probably be a priority, but actually I need to see the communication briefs that was talked about as I was driving down. I haven't seen that, and I'm more than happy to share that with you, Mayor, through Georgina, once I've got that, so that you can forward that to all councillors to answer that question accurately. I don't want to say too much more because I honestly don't know. That's where I'm up to, so I appreciate your comments.
Thank you for that. Any further questions, councillors? No, if not, thanks, Bill. Georgie, for coming in and giving us that update. Well done. Thank you. And yeah, we'll look forward to that document coming in.
Yeah, I'll keep in touch on that.
Got note of it. Great. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Cool. Next item, councillors, is the confirmation of the minutes. And I forgot to mention before that the Chief Executive is on our meeting today on Zoom. He's on sick leave at the moment, but he is zooming in today as we speak. So confirmation of minutes on page, any alterations or additions on page 3. Page 4. My page numbers are the same as yours on Zoom, are they? Yeah. Good. Page 5. Someone like to move that the council meeting be taken as read and confirmed?
I'll
Councillor McMillan,
Second it.
Councillor Rawlinson, all those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Moving over to reports on page 6. And we have a rates remission policy there. Richard? Anything further you wish to add to the report, Richard, or?
I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, let's do that. Questions, councillors. Angus?
Oh, my question is based on the fact that it's been through council processes, public, and come back to us. I'm willing to move it, but that's only a question. I don't know whether I'll be allowed.
Well, if there's no questions, Councillor Floon, you got a question?
Oh, it's just actually a typo on page 13, clause 22. Starts off at 28, applications other than those. thought someone would pick that up, and I'm quite happy to second Councillor Mackay's move.
Okay, can't see it, but it's obviously there, so they'll just check to see that it's right. Angus moved and,
Can I ask a
John,
question,
second.
please?
okay.
My question is, you've got the list of memorial and community halls in there. Where does Balmoral Hall fit into this?
In response to your question, I made that very inquiry myself as I was preparing the appendix, and our understanding is that council treats Balmoral Hall as a council-funded hall as opposed to a hall with its own attached local community. So,
Okay, just one more to add. Terry Marai, should it, or is it? It's not here. Should it be there?
I went through our database for the list of community halls, and it doesn't appear on any of the lists from which I worked to develop up the schedule.
No,
so
it's not our hall.
I don't believe so, no.
That's fine. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you. My question was around the Maronan Hall. I thought we sort of disestablished that, or it came in under Hines, or didn't think it was a functioning part of our business anymore.
I recall that the Maronan Reserves Board was wound up and rolled into Hines, but I'm not familiar with every single one of these structures to know whether it's still in use. If it's no longer in use, then you should remove it from the appendix.
So you just checked that?
I think it has a use, but it's not by ADC.
Stuart?
Number 13 in the actual policy. 50% of the rates rebatable for targeted rates such as water and sewerage, but excluding water by metre charges. Do all halls have meters? Well, of course they wouldn't have, only those that are on town water supply. How can most halls have a 50% targeted rate on their water when there's only a few of those community halls that are actually connected to water?
If they're not connected to water and they're not paying a water rate, then there's no water rate to remit. I suppose that's the first point I would make. I don't know how many of the halls are on water by metre. That clause has been in your policy for a number of years. It wasn't part of the changes that we consulted on.
Councillor Lovett?
I'm just going to, if you're looking at Maronan Hall, could you also look at Linford Hall, because that's another one that's not used, that's possibly heading into town, that well, part of it. Oh, okay. Because some of that, like the Flemington Hall, I mean, yeah, some of these aren't being used, and I just kind of question some of them, whether is there going to be a district-wide look at some of these private halls, because I know this earthquake and this, a lot of stuff wrong with them, and somebody somewhere's got to make a call on the condition and the usage. And
During the submission process, there was a submission from, her name escapes me for the moment, who pointed out that there were a number of halls that were in some disrepair and didn't appear to be getting used. And what we noted during that discussion is that many of these halls, while they're on council land, in some cases they're not a council-owned structure. So the decision to disestablish that hall in some way or to demolish it rests outside this chamber. So if, and I know that Mr. Fabish has plans for a facilities review, but I don't know the full scope of that. So potentially it could be something addressed in that review, but you do need to be careful where it's somebody else's asset before you start asking the community whether you should put a bulldozer through it. It may not go down well.
Any further debate? If not, I'll read the recommendation out. The Council adopts the Rates Remission Policy 2021, attached as Appendix 1. I'm in favour. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you, Richard. Item number 6, adoption of the Development and Financial Contributions Policy 2021. Again, Richard. Questions? Questions before someone moves? Caroline?
I have a few questions. One was on the aspect which came up when we consulted with the long-term plan on the population growth. Is there, if the population growth is greater or lesser than we anticipate, which was 0.8%, and went down to 0.6, I think, is there provision within this policy to adjust the development contribution to reflect that?
The process for adjusting the development contribution, if we were seeing evidence of higher growth, is to review the policy. You could effectively do it annually, although the thought makes my blood run a little cold. But yeah, so that's the short answer. And the long answer is that we take a 10-year slice in our development contributions policy. We look at it every 3 years. It would be a remarkable spike in growth that we that would require us, I think, to look at this policy inside the 3 years, but there's always the potential to do that. It's just a matter of priorities.
Thank you. Can I carry on with my questions?
Yep.
Okay. Is there any other sources of validating the data as opposed to just the 2018 census? Was there any other data in New Zealand? I mean, I'm just asking.
What we used was effectively an update of the 2018 data prepared by .id, who are our current provider. We would much have preferred, as I'm sure Stats New Zealand, if we had better quality data, and we will for next time, I'm sure. But effectively the answer is no. We went with the best quality data that we had available.
Okay. Initial question. I'm just going down to the key assumptions now in Appendix 2. I think it's on page 34. The last paragraph. Each residential unit is assumed to have the same number of residents, like 2.5 is our health unit equivalent. What say, I've got two questions related to this. I build a new home and then I introduce a business that I can run from home, for example, plant propagation or, I don't know, growing tomatoes or hairdressing. So my water use is greater than my allocated amount. Is there additional charges to bring my development to ensure that that's reflected?
If the creation of that home-based occupation required a building consent or a resource consent for land use or a service connection, then potentially it could come within the development contribution framework, but ordinarily you wouldn't require a service connection because your house is already going to be connected to water and wastewater. Right. Resource consent for land use would depend on the nature of the use and the zoning that your property was in. So potentially such a development could slip outside the regime. It just depends on the circumstances of the application.
Well, would slip outside the regime, I'm assuming, if you use...
I remember dealing with a hairdresser who lives on a lifestyle block outside of Oamaru, where we actually did catch up with him. So it just depends on the detail of your district plan.
I've just got three more points. Is that okay? I'll answer them quickly. The next thing is, a lot of dwellings now are single units, you know, like mature age people moving off the farm and into town and living on their own. And they're not going, and I note that you've got 2.5 household unit equivalents, but some people will be one person. They're allowed to use, so they're not going to use their 550 litres and per allocated, which is your standard. Is there any recognition of that?
In our policy as it stands, no. We take a simple averaging approach. This is an issue that some councils, generally larger areas, have started to look at. So they have a slightly smaller development contribution for a 2-bedroom house compared with a 3-bedroom house. Yeah. So it's something that you could look at. You'll recall that we had submissions from the retirement village
Yes, we did.
people. I actually think, given that about 80 to 85% of our DC invoices relate to houses, if we were going to start drilling into a category and say, is there variation within this category that we would address, then those residential homes would be the obvious place to start. Happy to,
Yeah.
for the 2024 review, to bring that one forward, if you want to
Because
have a
there
look
is
at it.
clearly a discrepancy there in fairness with regards to who's paying for that, you know, because they're not going to use their resource that, say, a family of four who build a new house down the road is. That's my last questions on that.
Oh, that's good, because some of those questions should have been brought up in deliberation time. Yeah. Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. If there's no more questions, I'm quite happy to move the motion as it stands.
John, have you a question?
It's just a comment, really.
Okay, we'll get a mover first. Lane moved. John second.
Just a comment, bottom of page 23, funding to provide for growth, first bullet point, outside sources such as should not New Zealand Transport Agency be replaced with the words Waka Kotahi?
I'll correct that error.
Well, it's not really an error, it's two names it's got, but yeah, good point. No further debate? I'll read the recommendation that Council adopts the Development and Financial Contributions Policy 2021 as contained in Appendix 1. Moved by Councillor Brum and seconded by Councillor Falloon. I'll put the motion. I'm in favour. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you, Richard. Next item, Community Engagement Policy. That is on page 52. And we have Mel. Welcome, Mel. Anything you'd like to add or questions?
Nothing further to add, thank you.
Thank you. Should we have questions? Councillor Cameron.
Okay, page 66, please, Mel. I'm looking at the assessment criteria. My only question is with regards to, you've got levels of significance. We talk about low significance as impact on the community, less than 100 people. We go further down to low levels of service. I've just written this down and don't agree. Little or no impact on level of service, a low number of customers affected. And I'm assuming that that low number of customers affected relates to the number of under 100, which we'd talk about further up the table at the impact on the community. Or how do we measure that low number? Because 100 people in Hinds, for example, a small group, or Mount Somers or a small village, is a massive impact on the community. So I'm wondering how they relate to each other, please.
Tony?
That's a great question. Thank you, through the chair. So they do have some interrelationship, but we do have the separate questions to be able to identify, like you say, it might be a low number of people from a community numbers, but actually for those people that are affected, that could be a significant change for them. So they hence why we have the different criteria like we do to be able to trigger what we need to in response to whatever the situation is.
May I ask, make an additional comment, please? But Tony, thank you for that. It's very difficult to see how that is assessed. Little or no impact, a minor service level increase, or low number of customers. If it's not less than 100, what is considered a low number of customers? Is it a proportion of the community, or what is that?
Thank you, through the chair. It's probably the phrase you just used is like the proportion of the community, or the proportion of those that are receiving the service. We probably don't have a number. We don't have a number because it's being applied across from stop workclosure all the way through to a rating boundary change. So it's trying to be broad enough to capture the range of different facets of community business, of council business.
My only comment on that is it's open to interpretation, isn't it? And it's not yeah.
Yes, thank you, through the chair, you're completely right. Some say it's less of a science, more of an art, the significance and engagement space, but hence why we always bring it back to you, as you are the final decision makers, and if you thought we'd got it wildly wrong, then ultimately you could tell us to change our thinking.
Can I have a mover that the Council adopts the Community Engagement Policy to take effect on the 1st of July 2021? Councillor Lovett. Seconded. Councillor Brown.
Thank you.
Open for debate. There being no debate, I'm in favour of the motion. I'll put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you, Mel. And the next item is the financial variances report. Can I have a recommendation that we receive the report? Mover.
I'll move.
Councillor McMillan, Councillor Cameron. Put that motion. We receive the report. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. We'll go through the report. We have Rachel here to answer any questions. Page 3. Have you got them all up? Because it'll be a different document on your tablets. You've all got there? Yeah. Councillor Falloon.
Just one overall question before we get into the detail. With the flood damage, does the repairs of that come under OPEX or CAPEX?
Rachel.
Through the chair, it would likely depend on the type of damage. Off the top of my head, if it's damage to a large asset, such as a bridge, you would likely need to capitalise your expenditure on that. If it's something like putting up a new fence, you would probably be OPEX.
So, perhaps a question around that. When we get the estimates, which are coming very shortly, will that be, or does it have to be stated whether it's capital or repairs and maintenance?
Yes, it needs to be split in the accounts.
Before the work happens?
It doesn't need to be before the work happens. It's good to know which it is, but yeah, it's normally once you are paying for the work and where you code the invoices, that's when you split it between OPEX and CAPEX.
John?
The question why I asked the question is what is going to be the likely effect on rates? Because if it's CAPEX, we can borrow. If it's OPEX, it'll get hit by the rates.
Through the chair, your rates have already been set. Yeah. So if it's an operating expenditure amount and we overspend on our budget for this year, we will simply go into deficit for this year.
And fund it the following?
It would be funded, the next year's rates are about to be struck based on the LTP. Once you adopt that, we also strike rates at the same time. So the rates currently in the LTP, because we aren't aware of the total number that's actually going to be needed for repairs and maintenance, capital or operational, we have made no changes to our long-term plan for this because we can't. We have no backup for those numbers at this point. But yes, any deficit in any year will be recouped at some point, but it may not be in the next year's rates.
Hamish, have you got a comment there?
Oh yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to make the point that we had a conversation at Rural and Provincial last week with a council in the North Island that had suffered a significant event some years ago where they had simply had to loan fund the repairs of some millions and they are still paying off that loan. So the distinction between CAPEX and OPEX is important, but where an event for council runs into a number of millions, and we're still waiting for that number, but if it was to do that, then one option is to loan fund and pay it off over a period of time. And remembering that council, by specific resolution, as I understand it, can loan fund OPEX. So regardless of the distinction, you could still loan fund the flood repairs.
Yep, thank you. Dwayne?
Thank you. It's probably partly answered my question. I wrote this question down after the debrief this morning. Do we have an emergency fund for civil defence events and costs? Probably the answer.
Paul?
No, I thought they had kind of worked that out. Thank you.
We do have a emergency fund.
Must be something.
Through the chair, I would need to confirm, but from what I can recall, I believe there may be a civil defence reserve, but it's not large.
Not for structure and stuff.
And yeah, but there may be some money that we can use, but I would need to double check that.
Okay, thanks. Paul?
Through Mr Mayor, we had a disaster insurance fund or disaster fund, and from memory, it had between $2 and $3 million.
Yes, what?
It's been sitting there for some time, and it's only been used to pay the LAP insurance costs. Get funded from there, and it hasn't received any other funding since. It's just sitting there.
Yep, thank you. Page 4 of the finance report. 5. Six. Sure.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I just want to confirm that any roading capital expenditure carried over, subsidised, we do not lose it. NZTA are quite happy for us to carry it over to the next financial year. Is that correct?
Brian?
It's correct as far as the low cost, low risk is concerned, and especially for the work that we know will not be completed prior to June 30th on the CBD. All other capital works that we could do have been completed. We have a little bit of unsealed road maintenance that we can't do because prior to the floods, we'd crushed a large amount of material that we were going to put on the unsealed roads. We've had to use that material for flood damage.
Page 6.
Supplementary.
Supplementary.
Should we not be crushing some more because I think it's unfair for a normal gravelling to be sidelined completely. If we're going to apply for emergency funding, should we not be crushing more and applying for it in an emergency funding application?
We are endeavouring to expend all that we can possibly expend between now and June 30th. What we don't spend, we will lose.
So you got a busy 2 weeks. Page 7. Page 8. 9. 10. 11. 12. 'Angus.
Mr Mayor, thank you. As a councillor, I had a look around the district a wee bit during the flooding, and I happened to notice the number of water races that were aimed and successfully cut our roading network in at least 3 places. I raise this because of the stock water supply's reason for variance of $536 favourable about fish greens. When is this council finally going to make a decision on what it's going to do with its stock water network? E.g., are we going to persist and sit here and wait for a fish green development, or are we going to take the advice of the staff member at the time who said it was probably cheaper to close them than put the fish greens in? So when are we going to make a decision on that activity? Because they did destroy a number of our assets. I think we'd actually be in a minus if you added it up in dollar terms on what roads were destroyed as against the benefit of water races.
We have had the trial that was run with the Ashburton Lyndhurst, and that must be due to be completed, I would think, which will probably move on to the next step of getting the irrigation companies to deliver our stock water, and we've got a member of the Acton Irrigation coming in shortly to do just that for a section of the district. So unless you'd like to formalise something, Councillor Mackay.
Mr Mayor, I hope the next time I ask that question that you don't have to give that answer. In other words, I hope I never have to ask that question again.
Thank you. Page 13. 14. 15. 16. 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. John?
Yeah, I'm just wondering when we look at our building regulation, how our income is falling behind where it should be, which is timing, but our expenditure is up. When we've been told since the beginning of the year we're dealing with record numbers of consents, etc., etc., and I thought that would have flowed through into the financials.
Through you, Mr Mayor, yeah, we are going to correct that income with a journal for that catch-up, but I'm not sure what you mean by the expenditure is rising.
No, sorry, I was not. Withdraw that.
Oh, okay. So have I answered the question now? I'm not sure I have.
Question answered, thank you. Page 24. $25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30 and 31. Councillor Flynn.
Yeah, I see since this was printed, 2 of those bonds that we had on term deposit were away at quite attractive rates, particularly the ASB. Have we been able to get better rates than what we're borrowing at, or have we used some of those funds to repay some of the higher interest rate LGFA that we were paying?
Through the chair, good question. We have not got another bond. The money did come into our account. I believe it was around the same time that we paid off one of the LGFA loans. But I would want to double check exactly where that went in the timings to confirm that for you.
John?
The reason for the question is I'm still making sure that we're still getting the arbitrage that we've been working on.
Good, thank you. Takes us to the end of the financial report. We've moved and seconded. Thank you, Rachel. The next item is item number 9, submissions to Wakakatahi, speed limit setting rule 2021. And we have a new paper for that. Richard, any comments? You might first like just direct us to the changes in the new paper to the ones we were in our agenda. Right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would draw your attention, first of all, in the covering submission, before you go to the individual appendices, to paragraph 9, paragraph 10 and 11 and 12, which is picking up the conversation that you had at your workshop around the dilution of local government, or the dilution of the local in local government in this proposal. The in paragraphs, staying in the covering submission, in paragraphs 16, 17 and 18, there was a request to be a bit firmer in terms of the concerns around the target for school speed limits, and so there are some stronger comments in there. And there's also a suggestion which didn't come out of the discussion, but it seemed an idea worth bringing into the submission, that we actually specify a reduced time frame on the target. So I've suggested 3 years. The Appendix 2 talks about speed limits around schools, and again I've strengthened up some of the language there. By now some of you are familiar with my style. My style isn't necessarily your style, and this is your submission. So the comments under Appendix 1, you may feel that that language needs to be more circumspect, or you may be comfortable with it. But I felt I should draw your attention to that.
Anything further there, Richard, changed?
In Appendix 3, I've picked up the change that we wanted in terms of supporting 70 km/h speed limits, but not 90. So that's picked up in Part 4, Part 5 of Appendix 3. I think that is the changes in summary. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go for questions if there's any. Is it intended to present the submission in person or just in letter form?
I honestly can't recall from the submission document whether there was even the opportunity to present in person. If council wishes to present in person, then it's a small matter to request that.
Right. Councillor Wilson?
For finishing questions, I'd like to move the...
Okay, if there's no questions, Carolyn, you'll make this question. Righto, Stuart moved, Carolyn seconded. Open for debate. Carolyn.
I don't want to be a pedant, and I don't know if it's appropriate, but the gobsmacked, is that a word that you use in these sorts of things?
Page on?
Page number, Appendix 2. I don't know, I've just never seen it written. I wonder if they say very surprised or disappointed. And
astounded.
Astounded, you know, yeah. I don't know. I don't know the
Your
answer.
wordsmithing has been noted.
I just don't know if that's what you put in those things.
Everybody knows what it is.
No further discussion. I'll read the recommendation. The council approves the submission to Waka Kotahi NZ Transport Agency on the review of the speed limit rule 2021. Moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Cameron. I'm in favour. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you, Richard. And the next item is the Mayor's report. And I'll just add, obviously, the local state of emergency was declared on that day, 30th of May at 10:10. And from there it just got busier. And I'd like to acknowledge the great effort of all our staff who manned this room here for 10 days, I think it was, if not perhaps a wee bit longer than that. 24 hours to start with on 2 shifts, so there were 12-hour shifts happening in here. They were getting worn out by the end of that 12 hours, and they swapped over and kept the whole momentum going and getting to where we got to, which was good. The Chief Executive did a great job keeping me informed, keeping everything going, and we also had a wee team of caterers who kept them all fed 24 hours a day. Not just the people here, but we had other agencies here, the police, the Rural Support Trust. There was lots of others in here, Kiwi Rail, and missing a few obviously, but there was a lot in here, and they kept them fed and watered for that time, which was really good and appreciated by them. Just one less thing they had to worry about. We're on to the recovery now, which is it's just good because there's farms out there damaged which are getting huge amount of support from volunteers to tidy up their farms. They've lost fences, they've got gravel on there, they've got silt, they've had trees over it, they've had water pipes ripped apart, they've had some reasonable amounts of damage, but getting great support on getting them up and going, and that support will be ongoing for quite some time before they get back to their new normal. Yeah, so that's possibly all I could mention on the emergency. Councillor Latham, if you've got questions.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just wanted to endorse your comments regarding the performance of the staff. It was a big emergency, and I think there will be some things to learn from it, but by and large, I want to congratulate the staff too on an excellent job. Well done.
Thank you. And also mention the staff actually came, when ours were getting tired, they came in from as far as Dunedin, I think, and Huronuri sent staff down. I think that was as far north as they went, but they all pitched in. I had offers of help from Auckland City Mayor. We didn't need it, but it was offered. I had offers of help from all over the country, but we stuck with the closer ones first. But there was offers of support from lots of people around the country. Stuart.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. In your dealings with top echelons of government, Prime Minister, Minister of Transport, Minister of Agriculture, so on, did you get any feeling about the second bridge or upgrading the transport through our district? It's all very well on the day, but do you feel that they really genuinely have got the bridge in mind?
They've got the bridge in mind, and the Prime Minister said and on the day, and also subsequently, waiting on the business case, which will flow into pricing, site and pricing, and when we know that, we'll know how much to go to the government for, or NCTA for, to build it. So they're aware of it. I mentioned to the Minister of Transport about the connectivity of the district with Timaru, us and Selwyn, and as soon as a bridge somewhere in this district or Rangitata goes out, we lose the connection. We break it in half. They're fully aware of that, and I think there's also been costings done at some stage as to what that costs per day when a bridge is shut. It's in the millions. So there's reasons to be expedite a second bridge in this district anyway. And I do believe they are aware of it and waiting for that business case. Any other questions on the Mayor's report? Councillor Falloon.
Who actually does the business case? Is it us or Waka Kotahi or whom?
Brian, Stentech, I believe, is a consultant.
Because it's being treated as a local project at this particular point in time, it's being driven by ourselves, and Stentech are the consultant delivering at this particular point in time.
I'll move that we receive the Mayor's report.
I'll second.
Councillor Latham. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Item number 11, Councillors' reports. Councillor Cameron. Worthy report there. Do you want to comment any further?
No, we had a lovely afternoon, evening at this meeting.
Put your light, yeah.
Liz and I attended the COVID-19 Pacifica meeting, which was Minister CEO and Dr. Epi Talamatoga was there, talking about the usefulness and how important it is for people to get the COVID vaccine. Explained how it worked, explained the trial process, the safety of the medicine, and how it can protect the family. And then it was finished with a very nice meal. Yeah.
Would you like to move the...
I would love to
receive
move
your
that.
report?
Someone receive my report, please.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Next item, number 12, the draft recovery action plan. Tony. Any, we'll put in your hands how we go through this.
Thank you, through the chair. Look, this is all very much, it's pretty hot off the press, and there's been a fair bit of work since this was shared with you on Monday as well in this recovery space. So as you've heard this morning, recovery is the next phase following on from the flood event. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I did ask some of my recovery team to come over and just so you recognise who they are. I've got Ian and Simon and James, and also Chrissy and Janice supporting me in this work going forward. So I'm happy to answer any questions as you have them.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Right at the start, the background, the current situation. I think the first sentence should read, the flood event has had significant impact on our district. This sort of flooding is not unprecedented. We've actually had as bad, if not worse. So for us to have in print that has never happened like this before is not exactly true, but it is very, very significant. But that was just my...
Noted.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm in the summary on page 97, and I'm in the second to last paragraph of 2.1, I think, where it says, at 15:33 June 3rd, the Ashburton River came close to breaching Stock Bank at at River Road. Which part of River Road is that? Because the River Road that I can travel on actually extends to the scenic, not quite to the scenic highway, and down almost to Hackettry mouth. So which, and also if it's where I think it is, I'll leave that for a supplementary question.
Yep.
So whereabouts on River Road was this? Lady?
Through the chair, that was down near Wakanui, near Lovett's Farms.
Okay. Supplementary. Which bank are we talking about, the inner or the outer?
Stop bank, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, it's the one, it's not the stop bank, it was the one at the river. Lower, I suppose you'd call it.
The inner, the lower one.
Yes.
The one in 50. Thank you. It was a 100-year event.
The top bank wasn't touched.
Yeah, the one in 50 did well to hold it, didn't it?
Yeah. Councillor Lovett?
Just looking at page 104, number 12 here, about the bridge, repairs may increase anxiety for urban residents. It's probably all people coming through there, the national highway, the local, the whole lot, it's going to cause issues for, not just local residents. It's the frustrations.
Thank you. Through the chair, that's noted. I guess we're looking at it from an Ashburton District lens for our residents in terms of the impact and how we can try and support them into recovery. But it is certainly something to be mindful of, is for people even choosing to travel through the district.
There'd be more frustrations there if the bridge was shut. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think there should be a paragraph in Section 2, Emergency Response Summary of the events. It's all about, that's on page 96, all about Ashburton, Ashburton roads, so on, so on. There's nothing mentioned about the Hinds or the Hind River. There was significant flooding, significant bank breached. Actually, it broke out in the central reaches of the Hinds River. I mean, the Ashburton was practically, the banks held very well, but that I think we should say that the Hinds at 280 Cumex at Poplar Road is a real significant one, plus the water that had broken out before that.
But we could look at having something put in the report. Councillor Falloon.
I'd just like to thank Tony for putting together such a good report in such a good time. To me, she seems to have covered most aspects of how the flood has affected the people, the businesses, and the infrastructure of this district. It's still wide enough that we can add to it. It's a little bit like a recipe for a cake, in that it gives us a process and protocols that we can move forward to come out of this event. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, that's endorsed. Just on 4.5, Tony, you talk about reporting. Should you or could you have a note in there where the councillors get an update? like weekly sit reports to the exec team? Would that
Yes.
/ councillors work in there, or is it a different report?
Thank you. You've actually picked up a typo because that's actually supposed to be the executive team and the elected members of council, is that you'll be getting a weekly update through your issue sheet. We'll also do the 6 weekly activity briefing, but I have no authority to make any decisions on behalf of council as recovery manager, as you heard this morning. So anytime I need a decision made, you'll be seeing me and the team back again.
Great, thanks for that. Someone like to move that if there's no further questions? Councillor Lover,
Thank you. I'll move.
Councillor Falloon. Anything further to add, debate? I'll put the motion. I'm in favour. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Tony, for all the work you've done. You're the recovery manager. You'll get us there. Active. We're heading ahead of time. We have Acton Farmers Irrigation Company coming in at 2:30. Do we need to fill some time in for 25 minutes? We'll take a break. Councillor Doris. Welcome back, councillors. We'll reconvene the meeting, and we have Steve Booker from Acton Farmers Irrigation Company with us, and I'll just declare that I'm a director of that company, but there's no decisions being made today, and it's just for information only, so I deem there's no conflict today. If we do some further work on this in the future, then I will, and I'll step aside then, but today I'm happy to be involved. Steve, the floor is yours, Chairman of the Acton Farmers Irrigation Company.
Thanks, Neil. I guess the reason I'm here today is to talk to you about what AFIC, Acton Farmers, are proposing. We have started communicating with the council around transferring the assets and liabilities of the stockwater network within the Acton footprint, which is in the northeast corner, I guess, of the Ashburton District. So I guess I'll give you a little bit of background about the Acton scheme. Started in 2010 with the enlargement of the stockwater network, which had been running in that area since 1896. It was built by Rooney Excavation. They owned the scheme for the first 12 months, and then the farmers of the district formed a cooperative and bought it off the Rooney group. We take 3 cubic metres of water out of the Rakaia, about 3 kilometres upstream from the Rakaia township, flows down just under the end of the bridge there, and then we've got a fish screen, a bypass, etc. there, and then it flows across the plains. I think you've got a map with you. The red line is actually the main race across the plains, and then we've got laterals that come off for irrigation, 5 main laterals, and within there there's still a number of open ditches for stockwater as well. The area that we're in, the stockwater network and the irrigation network were leaking, will leak like a sieve, so we've started piping our irrigation scheme. By September we will have approximately 36 kilometres of it piped, and our long-term goal is to pipe all the laterals that head towards the coast, and we're just going to probably line the main race that goes across the plain. That's it in a nutshell. We supply 58 shareholders, very mixed farming area. Most of you are probably aware what happens down in that neck of the woods. We've been running the stockwater network for ADC since the inception, really. Doing a reasonable job, I think. Cool.
Thanks, Steve. Any questions of Steve? Lynette.
Just going to ask, there's a few lifestyle blocks and farmers right down on the coastal end of this who are often short of water. Are you intending to go right down to the coast to connect them to the water supply? Because it's quite fickle down there, and some of the lifestylers didn't want to put down wells.
Yeah, I mean, if they're taking stockwater now, we're just going to carry on the stockwater network as it is. I guess the pipe network that we're doing, any property that the pipe goes through, they have stockwater available. We're putting on the off-takes, they're having that. But if the open race network has still got demand, it will still remain going forward. I mean,
Councillor Flood.
Couple of questions. Who actually owns the land on where these channels and pipes go across? Is that still owned by the Cockies?
Mm-hmm.
And as part of the piping of the irrigation network, you're also piping stock water to each individual property?
We are conveying stockwater through our irrigation pipe to the properties that the pipe passes through.
Yeah.
Yep.
So therefore, what asset is going to be transferred? If you're asking for an asset to be transferred from ADC to Acton, what asset are we actually transferring?
I guess, it must be the fish screen. Acton have spent the money on all this stuff up there, but we have permission from the council to do it. So yeah, I guess water's the big one.
Easements across the land would remain because it cuts across farmers' land. So there'd be at the moment.
BCI own our irrigation consent, but we are under licence to them for the 3 QMEX, and ADC own the stock water consent.
Stuart?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. What sort of quantity is in the ADC consent? If it's 3 QMEX for the irrigation, what is the capacity or the amount that's allowed to be taken for stock?
Yep. So the total consent is 680 litres per second, of which BCI take 50 at their offtake further upstream, and so 630 comes into the Acton network.
And that consent is to be held by the council?
Correct.
So supplementary, you'll be asking the council to transfer the consent as well as the headworks to Acton?
Yes.
You've got no stock water if you haven't got a consent, so yep. The two go together. Councillor Lethem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What advantages are there to Acton to have it transferred to you?
Well, I guess we've been doing it for 10 years, and you know that's our core business is conveying water. I guess while there's still a whole lot of open races, we need like a reasonable flow to keep those races wet to actually get the water to where it needs to go. The majority of our stock water users seem to be at the far end of the network, so you do need to send a lot of water to get the water there, if you understand what I mean.
So, if I may, what you're telling me is that you'll be able to administer it and provide a better service by taking control of it yourself?
We're able to provide the same service.
The same service?
As what
So could I repeat the question, what advantages are for Acton to take over the running of the network?
I guess there's a potential for some spare water there that's not used for stock water.
Right.
The bigger advantage is probably to council by divesting of a liability.
Exactly.
Yeah. Councillor Mackay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Steve, following on from the Honourable Councillor Lethem, what advantages do you see for council if this move is taken and agreements made?
Well, I guess you've got a surface water sort of policy. Oh, you know, you want to strategy. You sort of it's not really your core business. But yeah, it's probably well, it's just taking it out of your hands, I guess. And you know, that's what we do. We convey water, and I think we do a pretty good job. So we're just getting rid of it for you.
Councillor
Thank you.
Rawlinson.
I might ask an interesting question. I have been a farmer and an irrigator, and I know what you're talking about, but given the differing views around this table in the district about people wanting to close down all stock water, you guys obviously have a value, or still put a value on getting stock water to those who need it. That's
Absolutely.
my question.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
No further questions. Thanks, Steve, for coming and updating us there. Oh, Councillor Mackay.
Question to you, Mr. Mayor, if I can. Right at the end of the report, there is a paragraph, Local Government Act processes. So how can Councillor Mackay assist in making those Local Government Act processes come into life on this issue?
I might refer that to Richard, what the process is from now.
The notes that were circulated to you provide a real nutshell view of a process that takes up about 40 odd clauses of the 1974 Local Government Act. At this point in the process, Acton are working to assemble 2 documents. One is a transfer petition and the other is a transfer proposal. When they present both those documents to council, the officers have a role to validate that the petition has the minimum number of signatures and that the proposal meets the information requirements in the Local Government Act. At that point, we'll bring a paper to council, and so that you can be advised that part of the process has been met, and that we're then proceeding to notify. After that, there's a process. Well, one of the parties that gets notified is the Ashburton District Council, so there'll be a paper that comes here to ask you whether you want to object to the proposal or not. If Councillor Mackay wanted to see this proposal come to fruition, I suggest you vote in favour of the proposal. And then it really depends on how the people that have a vote in the poll vote. If more than 5% of scheme users object, then the matter ends up in the hands of the Local Government Commission. But if they don't, and neither of the two local authorities involved are of a similar view, then it's a done deal, and we just proceed to implementation.
Councillor Mackay?
Mr Mayor, if I could ask a question of you, I'm wondering if you could ask the Chief Executive, who is our only employee, to be proactive in this matter, and for his staff, hopefully, to be proactive in assisting this company in this matter, so it can move forward at speed.
I can, and I'm sure he will, and they have been. Hamish? I captured it, I think, yeah. Yeah.
Yes, heard you loud and clear, Council.
Thank you. No further questions. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Oh, Richard, just one. The timeline from now, what sort of timeline are we thinking?
The timeline from here, the timeline in terms of the statute really kicks off when we have a complete transfer proposal and a complete petition from Acton. Then we've got to validate those. I forget the exact words in the Act, but the idea is do so without undue delay, or as soon as you practically can. And then you would take a paper to council, we would notify, I think it's a period of 6 weeks for the poll, and within a few days of the poll closing we'd have a result. So what we're trying to do, one of the provisions in the Act is that if Acton were to bring us a proposal that didn't tick all the boxes in terms of the information required under the Act, then they can't resubmit for another 3 years. So we're encouraging them to come to us with a draft so that we can work with them to make sure, and with Environment Canterbury, to make sure that all the things that we expect to see dealt with in the proposal are dealt with, so that we don't have, run into process problems. Sometimes the quickest way to get to the end, the long way out, take the long road out to quick way home. So can't be more precise in that around time frame, but we're trying to do this right, so we don't have to do it once.
Okay, thanks, Richard. Thanks, Steve. We'll move on to welcome to new staff and long serving. Ready for that, Sarah?
Through you, Mr Mayor, we have put the call out for people to come across sooner. We have a number of staff who are coming today that are from different buildings across council, and also field workers. So we have got one new staff member here at present, and a few more now. We're one short, so we can start with the service milestones and then go from there.
Right, the floor's yours.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to introduce a number of new starters. We will do that second, just so that we can get one more arrival who is out in the field as part of our open spaces team. So hopefully he arrives in time. So in a sort of different way, we'll do our service recognitions first, and I'd like Natasha Muller to first come forward and to meet Jane and also the Mayor. So Natasha works within the People and Capability team and has recently passed her 5-year service milestone. Natasha came to ADC with a strong recruitment background and was looking for a role that extended her knowledge into other areas of HR. Illustrated by her progress from an officer position to her current role as P&C advisor, she has definitely achieved this. Natasha is a key member of my team. We all refer to her as the nicest one, and this doesn't mean that she hasn't had to manage and give advice on some very interesting situations over the last 5 years. Her 5-year anniversary is just prior to arrival of a new baby. So we've got our fingers crossed that following the initial shock and excitement of being a mum to 2, she will return to ADC in 2022 as planned. So yeah, congratulations and thank you so much for everything you have done for me and for council over the past 5 years. I'd also like to recognise at this point Dave Hampton. Dave joined council in 2011, and during his interview, I recently looked up his notes, he said he had worked his way up to be a fully qualified electrician, but was after a change and a new challenge. As a local, he knew a number of council properties, and he suspected that on some occasion the tenants might be challenging. These are his words. But he said he was up for it and he communicated well with others. So this is all true, don't get me wrong, but I suspect looking back, Dave would say the biggest challenge has not been the tenants that he's interacted with, but actually the buildings itself. With the art gallery and museum building being the gift that keeps giving, Dave has had his hands full day and night. It is also important to note that Dave is willing to help out with anything and with anyone across council, and because of this and his practical skill set, it's fair to say he has probably put up more than his fair share of marquees and towed large trailers from A to B. Also of note are Dave's spending habits. Similar to his predecessor Don, who was known for turning over tap washers when repairing a leaking tap, Dave carefully considers every purchase, to the extent that over the past 10 years there's been an occasional two where he's directed to spend a little more by the group manager. So on behalf of all of council staff and ratepayers alike, they'd like to thank you very much for your 10 years service, and fingers crossed for another 10 years plus. Hi, and now we'll introduce you to the new starters. So if you're, when I call out your name, please just stand where you are and wave out so that the councillors can, put a face to a name. So we've got Dean McDonald, who's our general mower and machine operator down at the Open Spaces team. Perfect. We've got Natalie Liverant, who's our collections register at the museum. We've got Peter Murphy, who's a new building official to us. We've got Chuck Sunlu, who's another new building official to us. very good timing to have two new people on in that team. We've also got Simon Worthington, who you may have met before, our Economic Development Manager. And a familiar face, but has joined the bright side, Linda Clark, our Communications Advisor. And the bright side, not the dark side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah, and well done to those long service leave people, well done, and to the new people who have just joined us. Look forward to not personally working with you, but seeing you out and about in the building and wherever, keeping us the cogs turning in the big machine here. So well done for joining the team. Thank you. That now takes us to the end of the extraordinary, the meeting. You were going to have, no, you were going to leave early, that's what it was. Yeah. Okay, should we do, yeah, okay, we'll do afternoon tea. So just hold for. Yep. We'll just do the Ed Committee stuff now. If you'd like to wait out there, stuff, and we'll have afternoon tea together. We'll be about 10 minutes, we're thinking.